thanks to Phil for sort of introducing everything and kind of setting us up for the session. And I can sort of go straight in now, probably, if we're ready to kind of start. Are we, Phil? Have you gone through all the information you were going to kind of set out at the start?
Yes, I have, but it's
okay.
Just a sense check just before you get going, Isabel. Actually, I would be grateful. I can certainly hear you, Isabel, but if you all as participants could hover over your participants. Isabel, tick yes. To the right of your raised hands function there, that will actually give an acknowledgement that we're absolutely in the zone. So we won't take raised hands at the moment. Amanda, thanks for raising your hand, but if you can tick yes on your functionality that she is loud and clear and broadcasting, that would be most appreciative. There. If you don't have a raised hands function, I'll sort that out in the short break that we have there, but I'm not getting anybody who can't hear you at the moment. But let's crack on anyway, Isabel, and I'll work offline with Amanda and a couple of other colleagues that we have on the Zoom call.
Okay, great, thank you. So if we are slide 6, please. So as Phil sort of has already introduced us a little bit, but I'm Isabel and I'm Head of Strategic Services at DXW, and I'm joined by Wendy, who's also on the call, our Director of Marketing and Comms, and we both work for DXW. The digital agency, as Phil may already said, we work specifically with the public sector to improve services, and we work with public sector organisations across the UK to help them improve their services. And today I've sort of structured this session around 10 tips for running workshops based on my own experience of doing this. And I look forward to sort of hearing from everybody in today's session and about the experiences they've had. But before we kind of move on to introductions, I'm going to explain the purpose and the format of the session, which I've structured around 10 tips, and I'm going to refer to the first 2 tips when explaining what we're going to be doing. So on to the next slide, please. And my first tip is about setting expectations. If you go on to the next slide again, please. And so why is it important to set expectations? Because participants need to understand why they are attending something and what is needed of them in order to contribute fully and knowingly. And some people may well turn up to a session unprepared, or they may have been told to join a meeting by a manager or a colleague and not know what's expected of them and why they're there. So preparing participants in advance is valuable to do, or even at the start of a session, it's helpful to sort of relieve any concerns and anxieties about taking part in something together. So on to the next slide, please. In terms of today, I wanted to set expectations about why we're here and why you've kind of dedicated part of your afternoon on Monday willingly. And just in case we're not clear as to why we're here, this is some information about the session. So in terms of the context, DXW regularly run workshops, and we've been doing them a lot since online over the last 6 months. And whether face-to-face or online, they're a really good way to kind of analyse problems together and generate ideas and solutions. And they can be a really good tool to research and design things collaboratively. And today we're going to share some experiences of how we've done this and demonstrate through activities. So the goals of today are to gain practical advice about running workshops online, and to discuss and solve problems together, and to learn and test new methods and techniques for workshops. We'll do this by sharing our experiences, asking questions, and taking part in 3 activities. So, and if you have any questions throughout, I think Phil already mentioned, then you can use the chat, or you can raise your hand at any point. So on to the next slide. My second tip is about kicking off the workshop. I think we've already learned something about kicking off this one and starting a session well. On to the next slide. So why is it important to start a workshop well? I think first impressions, whether they're face-to-face or remote, are important, and you want to know who is taking part in something and why, and you want to gain the perspective from your participants about the topics you're going to cover. You also want to make sure people can hear you well and have access to what they need to use. The only thing that we will need during this session to take part is a way to take notes, whether that's on your computer or with a pen and paper. It doesn't matter, whichever is easiest for you. And we're going to do an introductory activity now to just demonstrate how you may start off a workshop. So on to slide 12 is our first activity, and we've structured this around introductions. I'm going to spend the next sort of 15 minutes doing this. We're quite a big group, so introductions would take longer than if we were a smaller group, but they're also an opportunity for us to meet one another and connect with people after the workshop itself. So what we're going to do now is we're all going to take a minute and in silence just identify and write down one opportunity and one challenge that you recognise from remote working, and perhaps it's been a challenge or an opportunity presented in your organisation recently. And after we've had our minute, we'll sort of take turns asking the next person in the list of participants to kind of introduce themselves after yourself. So if there's an example on this slide as to kind of what an opportunity or challenge may be, it only needs to be short, kind of the amount of words you'd get on a single post-it, really. So if we're happy to kind of start a minute, Phil, and give everybody the minute in silence to think about their opportunity and challenge, and then we'll do some group introductions.
Okay, who wants to go first then? Go on, let's put democracy in action, and let's could you put a raised hand there? Anybody who wants to start off first? Okay, Rebecca, would you like to start off that? Thanks. I'll munch you there.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Yes, thank you.
Sorry. Yes, I don't mind going first. So I'm Becky. I'm Service Design Lead at Yorkshire Housing. I think an opportunity for remote working is that we closed all our local offices 4 weeks before lockdown. So it's been a great opportunity to kind of embed agile working and kind of really strongly encourage people to kind of put in place some of the tools and techniques that we'd encourage them to do. And obviously they didn't have an option of going back into the office, so that helped with that. And I think a challenge for me is that kind of emotional intelligence. When you're running a workshop, you can read the room, especially when people people are sat in front of you, you can kind of see how people are engaging, if they're getting bored, if they're doing other stuff, and I find that quite difficult to do remotely sometimes. So that's my tool.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. And can I come to you, Amanda, please? Okay. No. Wendy?
Yeah, hi. I'm from DXW, like Isabel. So my one challenge is, I think, similar to the first person. Keeping emotionally connected whilst you're working remotely, I think, is quite difficult, particularly when it's over a prolonged period of time. And my opportunity is for meetings like this, it feels quite levelling. Everyone can participate wherever they are.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go to you, Stephen.
Stephen, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. I'm Stephen Batley from Together Housing. I think the opportunity, it's kind of in some ways enabled us to do what we were going to do anyway, just a hell of a lot faster. So some of the things we were planning on doing over an extended period of time, we've just done over the last few months. I think the opportunity there is to keep that momentum going, and I guess the challenge is about, again, it's the human side of things. I think it's worked quite well when you've got existing relationships, but for new members of staff or when you're forming teams that you've not necessarily worked in before, I think the challenge is trying to get that sort of bonding together and forming new teams. Thanks.
You must be the closest person in the UK to the sun at the moment, Stephen. So well done indeed.
It's just coming round. I'm going to have to pull the blind down soon.
How do you overcome some of the challenges, Isabel and Wendy, that certainly Stephen has raised there, onboarding individuals as well as new members of staff through the use of collaborative workshops? You must have had both experiences of that.
Yeah, I mean, we have to experience a lot of onboarding when it comes to new pieces of work and projects, especially. And it's about trying to recreate how you'd build a rapport with someone you'd meet for the first time in person or online, and making sure they have all the equipment and things they need to be able to do their job. At DXW, we sort of send people a package of things they need when they start, and personalized messages from the team. The whole team would do that. It's something we used to do in person, and now we're sort of doing it as a spreadsheet instead, so it's slightly different. And then making sure that new people and new project team members have regular catch-ups to see how it is going, because it is a different experience, and it is definitely sort of less human. I think I'd agree there, yeah.
Okay, anybody else like to just by raising their hand? Yeah, thank you very much, Tom. I'll just unmute you now. Tom, you're good to go.
There we go. Is that better? You can hear me now. I was one click away, just yammering to myself in my spare room, like a moron. Yeah, Tom Hartland. Yeah, many times. Tom Hartland, senior service designer at Bromford Lab. I've said that the opportunity with COVID and everything there's been a second wave, a refreshed view towards design thinking at large. Maybe it didn't quite COVID didn't remove the grindstone from people's necks, but it certainly put it somewhere out of mind, and in panic stations people were coming to us hungry for sort of workshops and facilitations across the range of their service. And the challenge, other than on a sort of project standpoint, collaboration becoming really difficult, time more than anything, time to get people all in one room to bottom out a problem is very thin on the ground.
Are you finding that that people have been used to or got familiar over the last 6 months with the technological aspects of that, and also they've adopted and adapted their own work practices to collaboratively think online, or is that still a challenge?
We've made some headway. It's not a total challenge, but I think the business didn't have a clear sort of route to communicate and hold these sessions at first. So we were using Zoom as sort of an ad hoc solution. Then we went to Teams because the business signed up to it. And even still, you know, the digital literacy in most of our colleagues isn't completely up there. And furthermore, you know, Teams keeps releasing features, so does Zoom. So technology is always evolving. We're trying to keep up with what's happening and keep an eye on the roadmap to make sure that whatever sessions we do run are using the best of the products available, I guess.
Yeah, appreciate that, Tom. Yeah, let's go to you, Amanda. Amanda, so.
Yeah. Hi, I don't know if you can see me yet.
Yes, we can.
Top as well. Hi, Phil. Sorry about earlier to get a call. Yeah, I'll use the challenge and the opportunity by giving you an example. We run a staff conference every year, what we call Staff Roadshow. So the opportunity is we'll definitely save some money because there's no venue, there's no bacon sandwiches, there's no buffet lunch, etc., and no sound people. So that's the opportunity. Plus, we'll save the planet with not all those vans turning up in one place. The challenges, same related to using that example, the staff roadshows have also, as well as being presentations from senior management team, the other thing that we do there is very participative. The challenge for us, half of our workforce are trade operatives. Sorry, I didn't explain, I'm from Burnsley Helms, which is an Almo up in Barnsley. So half our workforce are trade operatives. So the challenge for us is going to get them, whether we use Teams or Zoom, the internet connections, the access, actually getting them to put the tools down and join in with the road shows. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Amanda. And finally, let's go and jump over to you, Grace. Thank you. I've just asked you to unmute your microphone.
Hiya. Oh, how do I put my camera on?
You're all right. You can.
There we go. It feels a bit better to have, then everyone can see. It feels like you're talking to an actual human being. So I guess I think the opportunity I've identified is that generally speaking, it's actually easier to pin people down because especially depending on the level of seniority of people that you're looking for, a lot of our senior leaders and stuff have a lot of travel usually in their diaries because we're based all across the southwest of the country. And actually, now that everyone's kind of settled into the new normal, people are more available to join kind of collaborative sessions because they're not traveling so much, and now things are kind of settled down a bit and it's not so crazy. So I'd say that's an opportunity. Challenge for me, aside from sharing an office with my husband, is probably I would go along the same kind of emotional intelligence route and keeping people engaged, especially when you've got a longer session, and trying to make, we've kind of flipped it, if you like, into an opportunity. We've had a few practice sessions with workshops that we've been holding with new team members that we've just recently recruited, and now we're looking at doing them slightly differently based on the feedback that we got from them. So we're kind of trying to take the negative and make it into a positive to improve our service as we're in service design.
Good, continuous improvement, like it. Good. Thank you very much indeed, Grace. Appreciate that. Wendy and also Isabel, back to you. Is that what you're getting from your customers, your clients as well? Some challenges as well as some opportunities there, and to benefit from this new environment that we find ourselves working in more so than ever before. Oops. Isabel?
So yeah, I agree with like lots of the things that people have said already. I mean, I hadn't actually thought about the money and the environmental impact, but that's an interesting angle. But I definitely think like you do have greater access to people, and those levels of seniority have broken down. I think you can talk to who you want to, kind of when you want to, and I don't think it was the same when you had to knock on someone's office or speak to their assistant to get kind of a meeting with them. I think it's kind of changed that. I do think that it's led to kind of opportunity for people who are quieter to be potentially more quieter. And kind of hide behind others in meetings, or kind of be less visible, which is hard, I think, potentially. I'm interested in knowing a few more opportunities and challenges from the group.
Yeah, so if you'd like to raise your hands, you can do that by clicking on the participants icon there, the two people there, and raising your hand, and then I'll unmute your microphones there. But whilst a couple of other people raise their hands or consider their viewpoints there, what I thought was quite interesting is that a couple of people did raise the issue of EQ and emotional intelligence that has to go into that. Do you think that's been left behind as we kind of like jumped into this online environment? I mean, it's a key part of collaborative workshops, isn't it? Sensing not only the from a IQ point of view, but the EQ, how people feel and how they respond, and how to engage them on an emotional level rather than just a intellectual level. How do you overcome those challenges, Isabel, when building a session, or even building a session where, as we've seen, there are diverse groups of people that we're embracing or putting together in a virtual environment? Some people who are not necessarily competent or conversant in digital skills, and other people who obviously it comes down to them straight away. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some topics which you can't expect for that to happen. I mean, but then some topics of workshops would be more engaging and bring to life those sort of more human aspects, I think. And I guess it's about the people running the session and the colleagues of those who are there trying to read the remote room a little bit to understand if people are not joining in for some reason, and maybe following up. Maybe it's having smaller sessions with smaller groups, and it's what actually group discussion allows to happen, I think. The more human side, a more in-depth conversation. But I think the topic of the subject matter, the topic could definitely help. Shall we finish
we've got one more person who in Lucy, who's raised her hand, and thanks, Lucy. Do you want to just quickly share your thoughts and then jump back to you as well?
Okay. Hi, I'm Lucy Rickson. I'm from Westwood Housing Group, which is based in Southwest. I've realised that my challenge and opportunities are two sides of one coin, which is about communication. The opportunity is that when you're working from home, you can really focus. You can give yourself a whole day maybe to look through a whole lot of things that you want to do and get a job done. But the other side of the coin is that when I want to get hold of some people, you can't get hold of them because they're spending all day doing one thing and focusing on that. Or they're hiding behind the telephone that you can't get through, or they're not picking up. So that's my challenge and opportunity. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well, actually. I just wondered, Phil, if there's some people in the group who haven't said hello and where they're from, and if we just wanted to hear who else is on the call, and then we'll go on to my third tip.
Yeah, if you could post that in the chat. Okay, Charis, so I'll come to you in a second there. Thank you very much indeed for raising a hand. And if you do want to speak, just make sure you just raise your hand. Just click on the participants and then click the raised hands function, and we'll come to you there. If not, we'll just move on as well.
Okay.
Isabel, just over to you.
Great, thank you. So if we move on to slide 13, please, Phil. My third tip is clear and simple instructions. And I think that last hope around communication is the opportunity around communication is quite clear here. And it's very important for the clarity, whether remote or face-to-face. So on to the next slide. Explaining and presenting things clearly to your participants is really essential, I'd say, to any sort of good, valuable online session, to ensure that people understand and they engage in what they're doing, and they kind of understand why they're doing the things they're going to do. So keeping instructions clear and concise helps, and considering what you say and write throughout is important. You want to avoid language that's overly complex or technical, and it's almost worth getting a second view as to the words you're writing and saying, because you don't want to exclude any of your participants from contributing due to the kind of the words that you use. And it's about making instructions and messages simple and repeatable, because there are lots of distractions in any environment, and some people may have to join a session and at different times and leave and rejoin. So I think being able to say the instruction more than once is quite important, to reiterate what has to happen. On to the next slide. This is an example of an instruction that you might give your participant. And so the first way the sentence is written is perhaps a more informal and less user-friendly way of saying something. And the second sentence is the same message but clearer. And I think this is actually an example that Wendy provided, Director of Marketing Comms, and yeah, it's important to recognise what you're writing and saying verbally when you're asking your participants to do something. So on to the next slide. My fourth tip is back to what Phil sort of asked about engaging your audience. I think this is the fundamental part of a collaborative workshop, whether remote or in person. Rather than talking about something in theory, now we're going to sort of engage as a group in practice through our second activity to kind of see how you do engage your audience. So on to the next slide. I'm going to just talk through our second activity, which we're going to do in 3 groups for 15 minutes. And I mentioned at the beginning, like, collaborative workshops are a really good way to solve problems. So this activity is aiming to achieve that. And there are a number of steps to this activity that I've written on these 2 slides, along with some timings. And just to run through what we're going to do before we do it, we're going to split into our groups. One person in the group thinks of a problem they face that needs solving. It could be something real, like introduction of a system or policy or a conversation that's been difficult, or it could be a fictional scenario if you prefer. That person who thinks of the problem then sort of describes their scenario to the rest of their group, and then the group have the time to ask clarifying questions about the scenario. You move on to the next slide. Then the group has a discussion about how the problem could be solved based on their own experiences, and then the final step is that the person with the problem kind of responds to the group's ideas. Then once we've done this session, we're going to come back together and just talk about how we found the exercise and whether we actually solved a problem collaboratively. It would be great to know if a problem was solved in collaboration. Does one of the groups want to? My group, Lucy, shared kind of a problem with the group. I don't know if you want to kind of tell the wider group if you think your problem was solved or aided by the conversation.
Yes, it was. Yeah, we had a really good conversation, and I was saying that the feedback I got was very practical. They'd also thought about the strategic side of things, and also some people had gone through the same issue, and they had come out the other side, and that was reassuring that you can do it and it will work. So that was really good. It was solved.
Great, thank you. What about your group, Wendy?
I think Stephen's going to respond. He was our person A.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, in terms of the issue, it was about how we communicate across when you've got multiple projects going across a widespread organisation, people delivering services remotely, and we're producing summaries, but also quite a lot of detail, trying to take advantage of teams and people basically not pleasing any of the people any of the time by trying to hit those two markets. And it was quite a good debate, and just a simple idea to link those together, provide a weekly summary or a monthly summary, but direct links through to the projects for those that have got details. So it was a really practical solution and quite a good debate about the problem. Thanks.
That's great, thank you, Stephen. And Phil, was it your group, the third group?
It was certainly I floated in that, but Michelle from DIN was participating in that group. And Michelle, could you unmute yourself?
It was Tom that had the cracking challenge, and I think it ended up being quite a good therapy session for us all, actually. Do you want me? I'll run through it very quickly. I think Tom was still feeling the scars from attempting to hold a workshop that used to combine people who were physically in the room but also were virtually at home, and felt a bit restricted by the lack of being able to work flexibly, change tack, understand that actually everything would have to be pre-planned in advance, and actually found that quite restrictive in terms of a design workshop. But there's some really practical feedback sessions, suggestions from practical examples that other people have got around, which is, well, change the format slightly to make it more of a show and tell type format, so people can pitch their idea and use a panel sort of format to read back feedback, so you're still gathering people's ideas but you're using it in a different way. Philip, you had a really good point that actually we can learn a lot from other sectors, mainly schools and teachers. How are they getting around holding workshops and getting that participation and physically getting materials out? So that answers the questions in terms of participation, but still doesn't answer the full question around how can you flex when a session needs to change depending on how it's progressing. And the other suggestion, which I thought was brilliant from Charisse, was a buddy system. If we are working with a hybrid version, why don't we take that advantage and buddy up somebody who's physically within the room and also virtually to work together? So you're actually making the most of that. There were some practical points of view, which is, I think we're still stuck in the old world, which is a workshop means a PowerPoint presentation, some felt tips and post-it notes, and actually technology and using the cameras a little bit better and more than one may work or may be needed in future, and actually using other people to support online events, which is somebody else fields the questions and sorts out the tech while the workshop facilitator supports it. But yeah, we all felt better, and hopefully Tom did too after that 10 minutes together.
Wow, that sounds a really practical kind of problem solving. So that's great. That sounds like all the conversations were successful. So shall we continue with the deck, and we're on to our fifth tip for running workshops, and that's slide 19. So and also marks our third and final activity. Now we've kind of got some energy, it might make sense to go straight into that. And tip 5 is about discussion. We sort of already started facilitating discussion in our groups, and again, we're going to sort of demonstrate how discussion works well practically, rather than sort of talking too much about it. And after the discussion we have in groups, we'll feed back. So I'll just run through what we're going to do in our groups for 15 minutes. And in your group, you have 1 minute to pick a topic that you want to discuss, and it can be a suggested topic, or it could be something else, or perhaps it's something you raised as an opportunity or fear at the start. Going to the next slide. Once you've picked your topic, you've got 3 questions, and you've got 3 minutes for each question. Those 3 questions are generic to any kind of topic you pick. So you want to ask what the problem you're trying to solve and why, and who you are solving the problem for, and what outcomes you're seeking to achieve by solving the problem. And then on the next slide, it's just a note that everyone should sort of participate to contribute where they can. And each group, you probably want someone to facilitate this and someone to keep track of time, someone to note take and someone to feedback. And then we'll, when asked by Phil, we'll sort of return to the main room. But if we're happy to return to our group and go till 3:20, and then sort of come back together. Sorry, just to check, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can, yeah.
You can, great, sorry. So are we all back together?
We've got 16 out of the 20, so yeah, let's.
Okay. Okay, I think we kind of, for the matter of time, I wonder if we could do initially sort of, we're going to take feedback at the end, but a bit of a thumbs up or the thumbs down thing to your group discussion in terms of the structure, and if you got through your topic and your questions and you all had kind of clear roles. So if we were able to sort of do that now and then move on to slide 23, which is this, like, tip number 6. Is that okay?
Yep. Yep.
Cool. Great. Did you have some thumbs up and down response?
Yes, indeed. Yes, a few thumbs up. If you don't know how to use the emoticons, they're to the right of your screen. They're called Reaction Plus, and you can put at the bottom right of your screen. So you can click on that, give us a hands up or a high five or whatever floats your boat, as people do these days.
Great, thank you. So yeah, tip number 6 is about structure and methods, and we've sort of like tested a couple just now to kind of illustrate, and I think it's valuable to mix up methods. Participants probably don't want to listen to someone talking at them for too long, but then equally they don't want to spend the whole time in and out of activities for too long. Let me move on to the next slide. I've just provided some examples of things that work and things that probably work less well in terms of structure and methods. Some of the things already mentioned about clear and simple tasks work well. Templates work well, I think, like whether they're digital or paper, having pre-prepared examples and guiding questions to kind of guide your group along. Stories and case studies to kind of bring content alive is really, really helpful as well. Different types of content. It might not be just words or pictures, but you could have videos and sound bites and various things to kind of mix it up. And then also in terms of methods, it's activities, different types of activities to help you solve the problem are all things which I would suggest work well. Things that don't work well, unfamiliar technology can often kind of railroad a session if people aren't clear how to use something, and or overcomplicated methods when people have to learn too many things to contribute, or just having too much content to take in and absorb in a short session. So if we move on to the next slide, I'm going to just show you some examples of some of the things we do at DXW, and just to show you some of the structure and methods for sessions. So on the next slide, examples about road mapping, and we refer to road mapping as technique for facilitating conversations and creating shared plans. And that group discussion was a very, very mini version of how we would conduct a roadmap, with a lot longer time and more questions, and try to kind of come to a collective agreement as to what we wanted to do, or a problem we wanted to solve. On the next slide, there are examples of how we would understand the context of a situation. So many workshops for us would start with timelining an activity. It could be timelining a process or a policy or a system to understand what is happening currently in this space, what's happened previously and what's happening in the future. It's a really good collaborative way to find out a lot of information in a short frame of time and lots of things that you can come back to after your workshop. And also workshops are a good way to kind of track dependencies between project teams by bringing together potentially a larger group of people that you might normally do, and giving them a tool where they can kind of share across their teams with ease and sort of change information with ease as well. So onto the next slide. Examples which you may do similar things. I think lots of you have talked about your service design roles, but we do a lot of mapping of services in our workshops. So understanding what components of services look like, and then spending time joining them up, or service blueprinting, kind of really understanding existing services and processes in a sort of step-by-step process. And the online tools we use have allowed us to kind of collaborate over these things quite well. The next slide is like more examples that, again, that some of you, the service design colleagues may use in terms of co-designing processes and services. And these can be done on paper, or they can be done on online tools, like which I will refer to in a moment. But when it comes to paper, we often ask people to send a photo of what they've done on their notepad, so that they can share them if they're not comfortable with kind of using an online tool to generate their ideas or drawing pictures, which can be a lot more difficult. I think we'll just come to time, but I'll just quickly wrap up, if that's okay, Phil, shall I? So on to the next slide. And other things that we do in workshops, we understand users and stakeholders, and many workshops that we do start with profiles to understand who people are, what they do, how, for this example, how data would fit into their role and the challenges they'd have. And again, this generates like lots of information for us to come back to. We also use workshops to share information about users afterwards through sound bites and videos, quotes or photos. There's lots of different techniques you would use there. And the next slide is an example of how we've analysed research findings. Again, like in our project teams and with our clients, this is a thing we spend a lot of time doing, pulling together all the insights we gain from research and using online tools in the way we would have done with post-its on a wall previously, to kind of analyse key themes and to learn about things in a collaborative way. And the final example is actually just agile team meetings, such as planning, retrospectives and show and tell. They're all things that now happen in the remote world, and I would say probably just as effectively sometimes as they would have happened face to face. So if we move to slide 34, I just wanted to mention the 7th tip, which is accessible and inclusive workshops. And on the next slide, it's really important to ensure your session is accessible and inclusive. It's important that everyone who attends a session is able to participate, and there aren't like sort of barriers presented by the technology or content. And I think that's why you need to think about the tools and content you use before a session, and ask participants about their needs as well. That's a really key thing, and they and invite them to at the beginning of the session as well if they have anything that's difficult in terms of participation, for them to let you know. So on the next slide, I think this is the key point to mention, that like the tools, and use the tools that suit your organisation's technology choices, and it's definitely different across different organisations, but also that paper can be used in the same way as online tools, and sometimes to have the same or impact, or sometimes a greater impact. But these are just examples of tools we might use with our in our workshops. Mural, Miro, Jamboard, they all are essentially an online whiteboard, but they're all used by different organisations and have slightly different accessibility kind of characteristics to them, but they are fundamentally doing the same thing. They're allowing everybody to see the same information, contribute, and kind of come back to it as well. So on our next slide, it's about number 8 is about getting logistics right. And I think logistics are as important as the content. If you have more than one facilitator, sometimes it's helpful that someone leads on content and someone leads on logistics. And the next slide, I've just got some things to consider in terms of logistics. It's just things that I think are important in terms of planning and preparation, length and timing of sessions, regular breaks for your participants. And it's also important to think about group dynamics and where possible, instructions and methods, and also the technology, of course, that we've mentioned already. So close to the end, the next slide is about pivoting. And if you move on to the next slide, I think tip 9 is important to raise, that if a plan that you have for a session is not going well, how do you change it on the fly? Some things don't go to plan, and sometimes it's totally unavoidable. But when it does, or if it does happen, you need to know how you're going to spend the hours you have with people when they have your attention, you have their time. And I'd say when everything fails, like resort to a discussion and note taking, because that's always useful. On the next slide, I've just provided a couple of personal examples about when sessions haven't quite gone to plan or as expected. And from experience, actually asking your participants how they're finding the session, and if any adjustments to an agenda or format can be made, is a valuable thing to do. And take a short break if you need, and check in with your co-facilitators. Tweak your plan by removing an activity or spending longer on another part of the session. Think about the things you're hearing from your participants in the session to understand whether you might need to potentially change a topic. And my final tip on the next slide is, I think, the most important thing. And I think it's about meeting your participants' needs. And the next slide, so how do you actually meet their needs? Well, you can ask them before, or you can ask them during and after as well to gain feedback. But it's really important for any session, whether it's a remote or in person, and any size and nature. And we often try to involve our participants in the planning of our sessions, so we can make sure that what we do and the time they invest is valuable to them. And sometimes one tip here around short surveys in advance can be sort of a low effort and quick way to find out what people need and want from a workshop. And they're also good to use after a workshop as well, to improve your future session. So I think, so that's it really from my 10 tips. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I've definitely got time, but I don't know if anybody does have any questions, or I should hand back to Phil if not.
If you do have any questions, thank you very much indeed, Isabel. If you do have any questions, just click on the participants icon and then obviously raise your hand. That'd be great, and we'll just jump into that and we can answer your questions now. If you want to take it offline because time is valuable, then what we will do is that we will make sure that you engage with Isabel directly. A copy of the slide deck will be available at the end of this presentation. We'd be grateful for your feedback. So give us a 5-star rating, anything between a 1 or a 5-star rating. And so that will help us improve the sessions, and also if we're doing things well, tell us what we're doing well as well. We'll be grateful for that feedback as well. And I'm no doubt that you can reach both of us via LinkedIn, or you can head over to DXW's website to reach out to both Isabel as well as Wendy as well. Copy of the slide deck, as I said before, and also a recording will be available for you to review at your leisure on this. Upcoming dates for your diary: designing digital products for real people. That's on Monday the 12th of October at 2 o'clock. It would be great if you could socialize that with the appropriate colleagues on these sessions. We do want to get your feedback for these. This is so useful for us to make sure that we're engaging with you appropriately, as well as making sure that it's sending the right information to the right people. So reach out to my colleague Michelle as well, who we will be able to socialize details with, and who you probably got the information from at the start of this webinar. Thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate that. Time has escaped us slightly here, but I'm very grateful, and I hope this session has been useful too. So thank you very much to our colleagues at DWX, Wendy and Isabel. And also thank you for all participating in this and making it a really interactive and engaging session. Thanks very much and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.